Hey folks, welcome back to the show. Today's episode is about a compound that used to be taboo, but is gaining huge popularity and not so taboo anymore. So some of you may be able to figure out what that might be, but for the rest of you, I'm going to leave you in suspense. In the meantime, I want to thank you for being here, as always. You guys have no idea how grateful I am to have you here, have you leaving us comments and also those reviews. Please keep them coming on whatever platform you're listening to this podcast on, because that is how we rise up the ranks and reach more people just like you. Now, one call to action I'm going to leave you with is if you're loving the content from this podcast, you might really enjoy my newsletter. And so the way to sign up for the newsletter is to go to natnidham.com, which is my website, and you can sign up for the newsletter at the top of the page. And when you sign up for my newsletter these days, you actually get a 7-part series on all of the foundations of a healthy longevity lifestyle that I teach people before we even get into the more advanced stuff like bioregulator peptides. And then the last email of that series is a beautiful chart of all of the different bioregulators, their different names, where they come from, and the whole 9 yards. And if you have no idea what a bioregulator is, you will learn from this series. All right, let's talk a little bit about this episode. Now, talking about stress or overwhelm, you know, there is a solution to helping you deal with this. You emotionally deal with this every single day. And that answer may lie in CBD, but not in the way that you think, not in the way of numbing out or zoning out. In this episode of the Longevity Podcast, I have a chat with my good friend, Adam Wenguer, the founder of Element Health, to discuss the benefits of full spectrum CBD products. Our conversation dives deep into how CBD interacts with your body's own endocannabinoid system, which can help to restore homeostasis. We discuss how full spectrum CBD, how it actually helps to manage stress, improve sleep, as well as promote overall well-being without that high that's associated with THC. So we're not talking so much about CBD with THC here. Adam Wenguer is the founder and CEO of Element Health, a company dedicated to producing high-quality, full-spectrum CBD products. And I have to tell you guys, his stuff is the best I've ever used. With a background in performance coaching and nutrition, Adam's journey into the CBD industry was inspired by his personal experiences with managing his own stress, as well as overcoming addiction. Adam is committed to educating consumers about the benefits of whole plant extracts over isolated CBD compounds. And we do talk about this in the episode. So through Element Health, he aims to help people find balance and improve their overall well-being using small batch premium CBD products. So if you want to get your hands on your own and give it some of his products a try, all you have to do is go to elementhealthsupply.com and use code longevity to save on your order. Now, and to find out more about Element Health, you can go to their website, elementhealthsupply.com, and on Instagram, they are at Element Health. All right, ready? Let's jump into the episode. Hey folks, just a quick reminder that all of the information presented in this podcast is for information purposes only. No medical advice, no diagnosing, no treatments suggested here. Before you try anything that you hear about or learn about here, make sure that you check with your medical provider. Welcome back to the show, Adam Wenguer. It is such a pleasure to have you back.
Nice to see you.
Yeah.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
We've been talking for a while. It's so nice to see you.
Yeah, I know. Well, I think at this point, people get it. You know, before we record a podcast, we have to catch up and connect. And I think that what we're going to talk about today is I don't know. I feel, and especially from the conversation we just had now, we're going to talk about the endocannabinoid system first. And I think that it's all about understanding where cannabinoids, which is CBD, still has a lot of stigma for a lot of people. It's come a long way. I mean, certainly where I live, you cannot walk a block without running into a cannabis shop. Like you literally cannot. But I think that there's so much that's misunderstood and that hasn't been fully fleshed out in this space. that a conversation with you, someone who's traveled this journey and is so deep into the research and deep into producing products that really respond to what our physiology can respond to, is really important. So I'm really thrilled to have you back, Adam, because it's I think it's an important conversation, and it's a tool that in many ways reminds me a little bit of things like bioregulator peptides, amino acid complexes, because they are native to the body, right? We have receptors for these things in our body. We have receptors for cannabinoids in our body, and we just need to understand how to tap back into them.
Compounds that modulate our body allow us to work more efficiently instead of just piling things on,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Because I remember in like the early biohacking days, and even recently, I would I need to add this and this and this and this. And now it's so much, what can I remove and how do I create balance again in
Mm-hmm.
a chaotic and crazy world? And the endocannabinoid system, as you were mentioning, is this like miraculous system that it integrates with every other bodily system and thousands of other biological processes. And I think we do have to remove that stigma
Mm-hmm.
because people still associate it with pot, cannabis, getting high. And a lot of the marketing, it caters to that niche. And I try to go around that. Ours is really what I do at Element Health is we really focus on the medicinal qualities of it and not just throwing more things down your throat to increase effects or whatever it is. It's to help bring us to a sense of peace. We were talking
Mm-hmm.
about the book that I was reading to my son last night. I'm just like, I love this book. If he wants to read it every night, it's great. They call it A New Alphabet for Humanity. And we get to
Mm-hmm.
P last night, and I'm like hugging him, and it said P is for peaceful, and peaceful is feeling calm inside and knowing all is well. And that like resonated so deeply with me. I had to take his book and like sneak it in my pocket because that's like something that we're just missing these days. And I say we're missing these days because previously we had all the necessary stressors, all the great physical stressors of foraging and hunting and fishing and being part of the land, walking long distances. And then the second agricultural revolution came about, and it forced us more into cities and more heavy duty farming. And people lost those physical challenges. Now we have it all self-imposed. We were talking about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
We jump in the gym, we can run. Even if we're running on the beach, it's running for fitness. It's not running for like a real need. It's not
Yeah.
running necessarily connected to the earth with deep purpose. And some people might have that, and don't get me wrong, but we're also surrounded by traffic. We're being bombarded with blue light, VOCs. That's a big thing. When we were doing some construction, I'm putting glass in, VOCs everywhere. I'm trying to filter out everything in my house. We're just bombarded with toxins. That doesn't include microplastics and phthalates. And that in itself, just thinking about those things is stressful.
Yeah. I'm
Now
getting
that
stressed just listening to you.
yeah, I don't even want to talk about that much, but
Yeah. Yeah.
I used to not worry about it. I would say, you know what, I'm at peace. My body will push this out. But now that I have two kids, a newborn or 3 month old and a 3 year old, I'm like, oh my God, we need to keep all this stuff away from them. And I realize that a lot of people are dealing with this chronic stress all the time. And it could be a deficiency in their endocannabinoid system.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's two things. I think there's a growing awareness of what you just mentioned, all of the things that are coming at us from our environment that are a challenge to our system, right? And so that in and of itself is super stressful. But what the thing that we talk about a lot is, can you train your nervous system to be resilient enough so that all this stuff doesn't push you, like, to make matters worse on top of the physical stressors or whatever they may be? Is it possible to keep the nervous system balanced so that the body can do its work? I think what happens is, when we're in a state of constant stress, of chronic stress, your body's not able to be flexible enough, if you will, to deal with the stressors. It's a little bit like if you're standing on one foot and balancing a plate on a platter or a glass of water on a platter. If somebody comes over and tries to push you over, you'll probably fall,
Mhm.
right? If you have 2 feet on the ground and your hands on your hips and you're in a position of strength, somebody tries to push you over, you're not going to get pushed over. And so if we imagine that our nervous system is like juggling 27 different things and trying to keep all these balls in the air, and then one last thing comes and hits us, we're not able to hold it together. And that's where that that stress becomes so negative. And you came in, we started talking about how cortisol affects neurotransmitters like the dopamine, serotonin. I'd love you to get into that. But what's really fascinating is when you are able to tap into a tool that allows the body to maintain its balance and then therefore be more resilient to all these stressors that at the end of the day, you're going to be able to protect your 3-month-old and your 3-year-old from a bunch of stuff, but not from all the stuff.
All right. And if I'm stressing myself out, how am I going to be able to provide for them, protect them if need
Yeah.
be?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so we were talking about balance, and that's what they always associate CBD supplementation with, homeostasis, creating a state of homeostasis, because the endocannabinoid system, it does integrate with so many different systems. So we want to optimize it any way possible. Now, we can throw cannabis at it. We can throw all these different things at it, but we're just more piling on compounds, and basically it's receptor saturation, and we're just
Mm-hmm.
getting high. When you have a compound like CBD, and when I refer to CBD, I mean a full spectrum of cannabinoids because there's a huge difference between the two. When we give it the right cannabinoids and the right in the right ratios, the body seems to thrive. And there's, these big selling points. Oh, reduce pain, reduce stress. It's not necessarily reducing it. It's allowing our body to become more resilient to manage these things better to where, in a sense, we are treating symptoms in ourselves. We're not treating it with something else. We're allowing our
Mm.
system to become more bulletproof. And you had mentioned dopamine and serotonin, and I love this because I was following Dr. Robert Lustig. He's wrote a book on it called, what was it called? The Hacking of the American Mind.
Uh-huh.
And he discusses, yeah, I love that name too.
Yeah.
So we think about these neurotransmitters that are our drivers. Everyone talks about serotonin and dopamine. Dopamine's like the new cool phrase because we say, oh, when you're on your phone too much, we have these dopamine hits. You pick up your phone,
Yeah.
you check your phone 352 times a day. That's how many dopamine hits. And we become desensitized. But they're making it seem like dopamine is a bad thing. And it's not. It's the driver that gets us up in the morning. We need to have some kind of reward system. And that's what it is. It's a reward and pleasure system. Just like when you give a dog a treat, he's like, oh, I'm going to sit. You keep giving him that treat, he's going to keep doing what you want. Now, the problem arises when we are in a state of chronic stress. So prior to the chronic stress, serotonin is associated with long-term happiness, with
Mm.
purpose. And it is the feeling like, this feels good, I'm satisfied, I'm content. So that's one end of the spectrum with serotonin. The other end is dopamine. And with dopamine, we talked about it being more pleasure based. So this feels good, I want more of it. It's a great pleasure. And this is a remarkable tool for getting ahead in life, whether it's we want to be more fit or we want to accomplish a new task. We need that positive reinforcement. So the issue arises when we have chronic stress because that affects the prefrontal cortex, high levels of cortisol and other stress hormones. And how that interacts with dopamine is it essentially creates addiction because it gets rid of our sense of choice.
Mm.
High levels of cortisol, it disrupts our thinking, our critical thinking. And like in this moment, if I'm really stressed out, are you more likely to have that drink? Are you more likely to make a bad? We're more likely to push that button, hit Instagram, do whatever it is to give us that temporary push of pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
So dopamine can be associated with addiction when we're in a chronic state of stress. Serotonin, on the other hand, now this is more associated with depressive states because cortisol can downregulate serotonin receptors. And we're hearing so much about how people use SSRIs, and there's just so many new techniques that they're treating people with, all the new drugs. And really, if we can find ways to upregulate those serotonin receptors again, CBD being one of them, and again, a full spectrum of cannabinoids, we can better manage chronic stress, get out of depressive states, and potentially beat addiction.
Yeah, that's pretty profound. But with the SSRIs, which, it's, I think the tragedy of SSRIs is it seems to me that with the exception of certain cases where in the short term they might be a really great tool, I haven't heard too many people waxing poetic about them.
Oh, right.
Um, I think that in general, the general consensus, even professionally in the conventional space, is they don't work or they don't work very well, except if you're speaking to a conventional practitioner, it's like, well, that's what we've got. So we're just going to keep using it. And it's unfortunate because there are now, I'm going to say millions of people that are, if it's maybe not millions, but however many people are dependent, are looking to SSRIs as their way out of the state that they're in. And they're not being served by them. And maybe they're now becoming suicidal or more depressed, or which affects your self-esteem. It's like this crazy downward spiral. And at the same time, I think once you're on the SSRIs, you're not able to now tap into more natural methods like trying to re-engage the endocannabinoid system. It would be great if before going to the SSRI step, if we were able to insert let's see if we can re-engage your own endogenous endocannabinoid system to help you to self-regulate.
Exactly. And if you want to take it one step further, there is psychedelic therapies
Mm-hmm.
that are tremendously effective. But I'm more on the cannabis and endocannabinoid side.
Yeah. So let's
Yeah,
on the
exactly.
endocannabinoid for now. I know that there was I think the FDA just ruled against,
Yeah.
what was it? Is it psychedelics or
Yeah. I believe, yeah, there was something along the lines. I haven't
something
followed
very,
them
very
much.
recently in the last couple of weeks?
I think it was treating PTSD with
PTSD was,
MDMA.
yeah, with MDMA. And
Yeah.
if I know Dave Rabin from Apollo was really very vocal about it because he was involved in the studies, and it
Mm.
sounds like it's a pretty contentious issue. But let's not go there. That's
Yeah.
unfortunate. People will continue to fight the fight. Let's talk about, like, I think what's really fascinating about CBD is how now, particularly the products like the ones that you provide, are so available to people. And so helping people to maybe understand what they do and what they do not do. And what is what we could refer to as endocannabinoid deficiency, which maybe there is such a thing, because it's like people say, well, you don't have an acetaminophen deficiency, you don't have a whatever deficiency, but there is such a thing as our own endogenous endocannabinoid system that's now not being served properly. And do we have any insight into why that might happen and how it can get thrown out of whack? So when do we need to bring in an outside source to help to balance things out?
Yeah, that's like such a great question. There's so many areas I can dive into with that. Um, where do I begin? Well,
Just pick one.
yeah. So they did find that there's a direct link with clinical endocannabinoid deficiency with dysbiotic gut bacteria. They found that it goes both ways. So I know that was going to like light you up a
Oh,
little bit.
yeah.
Yeah. And they found that high levels of stress hormone can deplete your endocannabinoid system, a decrease in positive emotions in general. So then again, we're getting to the stress that affects serotonin and dopamine. That's why it's one big picture. That's
Hmm.
why I'm so like fascinated by the endocannabinoid system, because obviously there's other systems that might be a little more specific, but I like to look at everything as a whole, holistically. Just like with our products, we do full spectrum base. Um, the reason for that is, well, let's talk about the endocannabinoid system. It's basically your body's way of producing pot-like compounds. And I say pot jokingly because it's
Yeah.
really endocannabinoid. Um, so, for example, one study, there was a German researcher. He wanted to determine what was the cause of the runner's high. So
Nice.
he had three groups, and this was like so fascinating because everyone thought it was endorphin. And endorphin is the neuropeptide that binds to the opioid receptors, mu receptor. So he had three groups. One was the baseline group where they would run, and these are all based on rat studies, animal studies. So they would run and run and run, and they would have lower incidence of anxiety and a higher prevalence of pain tolerance.
Right.
It's just the typical runner's high that we experience, and that's what they had as baseline. The second group, they blocked the opioid receptor. So they were like, oh, all right, these animals are going to be all screwed up. They're going to run and they're not going to get all the positive benefits. The opposite was true. They had even more anxiety relief. And I forget how they tested exactly the levels of anxiety, but also their pain threshold was much higher. So then they decided, okay, we're going to genetically modify these rats to block their endocannabinoid receptors or completely remove them.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the exact opposite that happened. When they ran you, they basically had extreme levels of anxiety and they were in massive pain. So
Wow.
that told us, I thought that was clear-cut evidence that the runner's high is directly associated with endocannabinoids. Now, endocannabinoid, I know, like, for me, it's just...
Yeah, let's define
like,
what that means exactly. It's a big
yeah,
word.
it is, right? It sounds so fancy, but really, anandamide is the one that I like to work with. It's basically the cannabinoid that interacts with the CB1 receptor. The CB1 receptor is found in the brain. So this helps regulate the endocannabinoid system, your stress, your mood, your ability to sleep, your hormone production, bone growth, fertility. Like almost every system integrates with the endocannabinoid system. And we produce one that they call the bliss molecule, which is anandamide. That's
Right.
the main one that I like to work with. There's other ones that are more immune based. This is opposite to an exogenous cannabinoid, which would be something that comes from outside. CBD, THC is the very popular one. CBG is making headlines, and that's exciting for me because I'm actually coming out with a new product I formulated. It'll be ready in like a month. It's more of like a daytime endocannabinoid.
Okay.
So yeah, that's what happens is CBD upregulates your body and allows it breaks down an enzyme. It basically inhibits an enzyme that breaks down your body's own bliss molecule.
Okay.
So CBD allows our body to produce more of our own natural bliss molecules. That's the simplest way to do it. Pumping CBD in your body isn't getting you high. It's allowing your body to work more efficiently and produce more feel-good hormones and chemicals.
Feels good to me.
Simple, right?
Yeah. No, it's pretty
I
simple.
always try to simplify. Otherwise, I'm going to use these big words and people go, what did you just say?
Well, and I think, what's interesting, I guess what I find interesting and where is who, how does someone know that, like, would you say that everybody should be taking, like everybody would benefit from CBD, or are there certain types of people that will benefit more than others? I mean, maybe someone has a balanced endocannabinoid system. And my sense from what you're saying is if you're able to function in this world with a fundamental feeling of groundedness or peace, it doesn't mean you don't sometimes get stressed, but
Mhm.
you're always able to find that center. You're relatively able to find your center again. Whereas those of us who are more easily thrown off kilter, is it just as simple as that it's possible that with a full spectrum CBD product, it'll kind of help to smooth the edges and help you to reclaim some of that resilience that you want to bring back to your system?
You said that perfectly. And that's like a great test is how quickly you get back to center.
Right.
I consider the endocannabinoid system like our interface to the outside world and how
Mm-hmm.
we can a lot of it is perceived stress. Sometimes there's no
Oh,
stress,
yeah.
but everything is a perceived stress. It doesn't matter if it's there or not, how you're understanding your place in the world. Do you feel connected? And I believe people really did for the longest time have that, but the technological revolution has changed who we are at such a rapid pace. And I think a very large percentage of the population doesn't have that groundedness about them. I mean, sure, maybe they're doing yoga all day. Maybe they don't have to work, or maybe they have a very fulfilling type of work and they don't have newborns yelling at them. I mean, who knows what it could be? If people feel good and they don't have excess inflammation, they're managing stress well, then they probably don't need it. But there was a study, I believe we talked about it last time, that certain populations from certain countries had lower endocannabinoids than other ones. I believe there was some of the Northern European countries. They were
Naturally.
yeah, they were happier overall. And when they were tested, they had higher levels of endogenous cannabinoids. Then they found other countries, like Middle Eastern countries, where they found that people were a little bit less likely to befriend your neighbor as quickly or something. They found like little populations. And then they checked and they noticed the exact opposite, that there was people with lower levels of endocannabinoids. So
Interesting.
yeah, I mean, for me, it's a daily nutrient. It's something that
Hmm.
I started off as a customer. You know, there was these big companies back in the day before it was legal, actually. And I was a young guy that thought I had stress. Now that going back on it, I'm like, that was not stress. You know, now as a parent, I kind
Let
of know what stress is, but I
Let's
know,
talk about your journey as a parent.
yeah. No, I do remember though that I would work these really long hours in the health field as a performance coach and as a nutritionist and all these different things. And I would work these super long hours and I had all these great clients and I loved it. But by the time 3 or 4 o'clock rode by, like I felt like this tension in
Hmm.
my body. And I'm like looking at the clock a little bit. And I'm just it's overwhelming, like later on in the day. And then I discovered this company that made CBD. They're not even around anymore. And I tried it. I don't even know if it was full spectrum or not. And I noticed that I just didn't get that. I would take it at lunch. And then my day was just smooth sailing. And I would take it like one day on, or I'm sorry, like 3 or 4 days on, one day off. And I'm like, oh, I don't need to take it every day. But I
Yeah.
felt it has like a compounding effect. And usually when people are getting my products, I'm telling them like, you want to get it in your system every day. Sometimes multiple times a day if you really need it. Some people are dealing with more. You know, recently I had my mom in the hospital. You had told me about your father, things like that. These are like high intense, stressful situations that's a great time to load up a little bit more. But what were we getting into? I don't even remember where we were on
It,
endocannabinoid deficiency,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
That some countries are more prone to it than others.
yeah, there
Although
was a study. What were you
yeah,
going to
I
say?
think
Sorry.
what's interesting about that is can it be a chicken or the egg thing? Because especially the two areas that you mentioned. So I think it was some of the northern countries and then the Middle East. I mean, the challenge with the Middle East is these are people, depending on what country you're talking about,
Right.
who are living under a massive amount of stress. And
Yeah.
so it could be that that's what is causing the endocannabinoid, there's systems to be depleted, if you will, because, whether not to get political at all, but no matter, there are so many of these countries in the Middle East right now that are living under either
Yeah.
active conflict or the threat of conflict or conflict nearby or whatever the case may be, that you can imagine that it's going to be a challenge to the most grounded person around because you're just constantly looking over your shoulder. Whereas you take a country where there's no threat of, you could look at Russia and Ukraine. I mean, right now, I can't imagine that there's too many, you know, fully endocannabinoided up individuals over there.
Yeah.
Like there's so much going on in their world.
But some
And
people manage it better, right?
but
Some
some
people,
people manage it better than others,
yeah.
but ultimately you're going to have a population that's more challenged, right? But
Right.
anyway, you were just about to talk about a study on about it. What we're really talking about is this whole deficiency of endocannabinoids. How do you define yourself as a person who could benefit
Right.
from exogenous supplementation, where you're in a place where your body cannot no longer provide you with what you need. And so now you're kind of in this off kilter world.
Mhm. This study was very significant. I believe it came out in 2019, or maybe it was right after COVID hit, because what they did was they wanted to determine how social isolation, yeah, that makes sense.
Isolation.
Isolation.
Yeah.
I was going to say socialization. Social isolation
Yeah.
affects the endocannabinoid system. And they found that, of course, they did it on animals again at this point because it takes a long time to do it, that the observed isolation caused endocannabinoid dysfunction. And what they tried to do, they were like, let's see if there's a more natural means for improving receptor density again in the cannabinoid system, serotonin. So they're like, let's give them chronic handling. So they pet these rats and they put them back in a social atmosphere. And they did it for an extended period of time. But this was not this was not enough. This wasn't adequate enough for to improve receptor density and binding, which I thought was like mind blowing because we had so many people isolated for
Mm-hmm.
so long that what if we put them back in society? Everything's clear. Maybe the endocannabinoid system is still suffering in a
Yeah.
long-term level, almost like a long COVID symptom, even without contracting COVID. I just mean, there's so many ways that we find that we can be stressed out, and people were isolated, especially in Canada. I mean, I'm here down in Florida. People were out and about within 2 months or within a month, but I try to think about the long-term effects of people, even like someone like my mother or family members that were scared shitless,
Oh, yeah. Well,
And
they,
they,
many people still are.
yeah, it was self-imposed and it's still going on. And then what does it do? So you get a dysregulated cannabinoid, endocannabinoid system, which is causing you to be more stressed out, which is going to cause you to want to be isolated even more. So it's
Yeah.
like a negative cycle. And I just find that like I get all these emails from people about how like their life has changed. And like I know we're doing something right when that's the message I'm getting from people. Of course, some people are like, hey, it feels good. We do make some products that are more like feel good, relax on a weekend as a substitute for booze. Because now they're finding there's a whole movement of anti-alcohol,
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I'm
we
super
try to,
excited about that movement. It makes my
yeah,
life a lot easier.
exactly. I mean, a lot of people would tell me, oh, I still just have like one or two glasses of wine here and there, but they're finding more and more detrimental effects, even from like a singular glass of alcohol once or twice a week. And
Yeah.
people see it on their Aura rings and their Whoop devices and all their wearables, which I don't use, but that would stress me out. But yeah, so I just find that like I wanted to create something for everyone. There's some people that just want a little bit more fun and ease in their life. And there's some people that are like really down in the dumps. And I know what that was because I had severe drug addiction. I may have talked about it like years ago, and it took me a long time to get back to feeling like who I was. And
Hmm.
this was before I even knew about CBD. This was like 10 years before it became popular. But I understand stress more now because, and when I say stress, I'm talking about like stressors that are maybe out of our control, maybe in our control, but the effect that it has on our body, not just going, oh my God, I'm stressed out.
Yeah.
Because you talk about inflammation a lot. We talk about just pain, whether it's systemic or acute. I mean, there's so many different side effects of it. And I love being a parent now, but I've also never known such a high level of stress outside of when I was a drug addict. I competed in martial arts and I would fight a grown man that was looking me in the eyes wanting to murder me. And
Hmm.
that wasn't stressful to me. But having young kids and you need to care for them and they're just yelling at you and you know how it is. You're a parent. I I totally understand that people, I used to just tell people, oh, well, just go run, go do this, like
Yeah.
meditate. It's hard to find time for those things. And
Yeah.
sometimes people have horribly intense jobs. Sometimes they're addicted to social media or they live in a densely compacted city on the 10th floor. There's so many, and I respect everyone that they're all going through a certain type of struggle. So we try to help as many people as possible. I think that's,
Yeah, no, I think that's fantastic. And so I think the takeaway there is you have the more recreational products, because even on that side, it's still a very low percentage of THC, but you do have the product that you can use on a day-to-day basis when you go to work or when you're going to sleep you're not numbing yourself. And I think that a lot of the stigma around CBD is that hangover from marijuana, like from smoking dope or pot or
yeah.
whatever you want to call it, which is that you're trying to numb yourself. And I really, what I'd love to articulate for people in this episode is the difference between using a full spectrum product that is not designed to numb, it's designed to balance your system versus something that's going to numb you, right? And that's not what we're after here, because numbing yourself is not in the end. I mean, maybe sometimes you need it, in a short-term intervention kind of way, but on a day-to-day basis, it's not particularly going to pay off.
Right.
And what I think is important to highlight, and what I'd love you to dig into, because before we started the podcast, you went through this this chain of how cortisol affects dopamine and serotonin that you were talking about before, and how bringing CBD in actually counteracts the effect of that chronic cortisol exposure on the receptors, the serotonin and the dopamine receptors. And I think that's a really important thing to understand, because it helped me even to see more of the benefit, and even to start to understand, how does CBD help with pain? How does CBD help with inflammation? How is CBD helping with the immune system? And fundamentally, it seems to me that if we know that chronic stress drives up cortisol, and excess cortisol in a chronic way affects all of those things negatively, then anything that's going to modulate or downgrade the effect of that chronic cortisol exposure is fundamentally, at a very upstream level, going to help the body to help itself. And you said this early, it's going to help the body's own systems to deal with the inflammation, with the pain, with the immune challenges, and with sleep. So it's kind of understanding that this is a tool that your body may have become deficient in because of the too much incoming, and you can't deal with it anymore. So now if you can supplement it, it's a little bit like you have a zinc deficiency. If we can supplement with zinc and help the body bring back into balance, it doesn't mean you have to take, it's just assisting.
Yeah, it is just assisting. And the endocannabinoid system, like, to digress a little bit, it's influenced by circadian and circannual cycles. So our light and dark cycles, our daily cycles, like environmental changes, seasonal. Mm-hmm. And these influence our biology, obviously. And the ECS helps modulate the endocannabinoid system, our own circadian rhythm. So I've always found that when our circadian rhythm is out of whack, obviously there's grounding, there's finding early sun, there's doing all the right things, but this actually contributes to that. We get more stress. And it's these cycles that I think we need to break, these stress cycles. Mm-hmm. So, for example, how it upregulates our serotonin receptors, and cortisol creates dysregulation among the serotonin receptors. It allows us to be more content, because serotonin is associated with the feeling of contentment. Not, I need more, but I'm okay with where I am right now. Mm-hmm. And that's a tremendous feeling, to say, like, I'm okay right now. Because a lot of people don't have that. They're always looking for, okay, the next, where am I going to go out to eat? What am I going to do with this? What if you just said, you know what? I'm okay. I can sit here right now, and maybe you're dealing with the worst battle in the world, but you have this this greater sense of calmness about you. And so the industry, the CBD industry, or the hemp industry, I should say, they feed on this. They say, oh, we want to market to everyone as we want you to feel bliss, or you're going to take all your stress away. And they put together these products of pure CBD. I don't know if we've gotten into that yet, but
not yet.
Isolated compounds. And this is something that I wouldn't say drives me crazy, but the education I try to put forth, I want to differentiate it so much, because all the early studies, that's the new hot thing. So basically a study comes out, it says CBG is a great cannabinoid, because, when we do studies, we always isolate.
Yeah.
So they find that it works. So then every company jumps on it. And this is why it's taken me a little while to come up with the CBD, the full spectrum product, because I want to do it properly. That's what I do with all mine. Luckily we started a long time ago, so I'm kind of ahead of the curve. But when there's new research that comes out, I dive deep. So the issue with these isolates, and if you see a product, let's say someone wants to go try CBD. Of course, I want them to use mine, but I always tell them, look around, see what's out there. Like in the malls now, there's kiosks, CBD, CBD. You can get it online, you get it anywhere. But if it's just saying CBD, not full spectrum, you're getting an isolated compound. And this isolated compound has limited efficacy. It's what's called a biphasic dose response curve. So it goes like this, where a low dose, very good chance it's not going to do anything. A high dose could potentially give you really bad side effects, and it's not necessarily going to be better. You really have to find this sweet spot, right in the middle. And the problem is, if you're really seeking relief and you take, let's say, 25 milligrams of CBD, just throwing that out there, that's a good standard number, that provides 10% relief for you. So you say, oh, okay, I'm going to take more. I'm going to take more.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to get it. That's the problem with these isolated compounds. In every study that I've seen, and I saw 10 of them today, actually, or maybe it was 9, full spectrum extracts provide tremendous more relief to a host of symptoms. And we're not even looking for symptom relief. We're finding it from balancing our body. We're getting so much more relief at a much lower dose. And that's the
Interesting.
great thing. I had spoken, I believe it was like to Ben Greenfield about this. And because he loves like the CBD that I produce. And
Mm-hmm.
he's like, man, I take like 4 droppers full because the study says you need 180 milligrams or 300 milligrams of CBD. And I'm like, dude, you don't need that CBD isolate. That's not full spectrum. He's like, oh, he didn't know like that you have to differentiate the two.
Mm-hmm.
Then he started taking 1 dropper full and he's like, whoa. That tells me that like you don't need to waste your money. You don't need to follow all these like companies that are really trying to push flashy marketing and unsubstantiated claims of we're going to fix every problem, take this, and it costs them like pennies. And they're
100%.
charging so much. So having a wide range of cannabinoids. So for example, I wanted to come up with products that were a little more geared towards sleep because it's like so hard to get people off the phone before
I
bed.
know.
It's a self-imposed stress, but they like it. And then there's blue light everywhere and they're having trouble getting to sleep. So I found we have a strain that able to put a little extra THC in it, just enough. Not enough to dysregulate or to lower your REM levels in your deep sleep, but just enough to help you fall asleep. And the perfect amount of CBD with CBN. So there's like all these beautiful cannabinoids we can work with
Yeah.
in a full spectrum base that allows people to sleep through the night. And I have like professional fighters who are dealing with, like I said, a guy that wants to beat you up, and every day their bodies are more banged up than most people I know.
Yeah,
And
for
they're
sure.
able to sleep through the night with like a little gummy.
Yeah.
So
I've used that gummy. I love that gummy.
yeah, it's
I
fun.
have.
I'm going to send you some more to Canada.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, shh, don't tell anybody.
Yeah, right. They want you to use what they have, and it's always
I
these
know.
isolates or these.
No, I like your product, I find, and I don't, I'm not Ben, so he has this way of just if a little is good, then more's got to be better kind of thing.
Yeah,
And whereas just a different approach. I just go lower dose and step it up. And I just love the sleep I get.
yeah,
It's just, it's more peaceful, but I'm still able to wake up in the morning. And I think that, again, like understanding the difference between a well designed full spectrum product that allows all of the different elements present in the full plant to balance each other out, even though, like you said, like you're trying to gear a product a bit more to sleep. So you may emphasize the CBN a little bit more. You'll be, working with the CBG a little bit more in another more daytime driven product,
yeah,
but you still have all of these underlying compounds that were created in synergy to balance the system out. The way I kind of think about it a little bit is I will take, certain supplements that provide trace minerals because
Mhm.
we can be so deficient in some of these little trace minerals, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to also use like a good magnesium supplement sometimes because I need an extra shot of magnesium, or a good whatever other mineral I'm at, or zinc because I have a deficiency in zinc. I still feel like I need to establish that base. And from there, you can start to play maybe with some of the elements. And I feel like that's where you're going with your
Yeah,
products, essentially, is that you're making sure that that foundation of balance is provided by the full spectrum product before you start, tweaking maybe one thing or another to help give people a different effect from different products.
yeah. And the problem is people see full spectrum, or companies realize that people are catching on. We're getting smarter as a society. So they say, oh, our product is full spectrum. So what do? They take an isolated CBD, an isolated THC. They take all these isolates and throw it together. And then on the ingredient list, it says THC, CBN, CBG, full spectrum, but it's not what's called a whole plant extract. So that's what we do. It's
Okay.
way trickier because legal wise, if I do a whole plant extract, we just take it right out of the plant, minimal process. And well, obviously we have to process, but we keep all the terpenes, which are the flavors, the scents of the plant, which have their own effects in itself. Flavonoids, the plant flavonoids, there's all sorts of stuff, cofactors, and there's just so much in the plant. And
Hmm.
we try to keep as much as possible. So when you look at our oil, it's like brown. It's
Oh,
like
yeah.
dark brown. When you get another company that's like clear, they cut it with MCT oil and they add strawberry flavoring and all these different things. Yeah, it's like an uphill battle to educate people, but that's the good thing about, having someone like you that has a podcast that you can speak to these type of things.
Yeah.
And yeah, getting that full spectrum extract is like so crucial because I get sent a whole bunch of stuff that people want me to try and I'll test it out and I just
Oh,
either don't
really?
use anything at all. Yeah, because people like they start these companies because it was a gold mine, I guess, is what they thought. It was like the wild, wild west in 2021. So everyone was coming up with companies and finding
Right.
labs to make things. And they would send me all sorts of stuff. And then when they find out it's not as effective, they want me to white label it for them. And I'm just not going to do that anymore.
No.
We've never done that, but I just find that there's just no point. We keep it simple, small batch. That's another thing.
Hmm.
Uh, the issue is there are a few big companies that produce great products, but they're out in California, Colorado, and they have these massive farms. They're utilizing cheap labor. The soil quality is probably horrendous.
Yeah.
So what are you actually getting? You know? So that's why it's important to know from seed to bottle, the entire process.
I love it. I love it. Um, okay. So what else were we going to talk about? I mean, and I think we've touched on this whole isolates versus full spectrum piece. And I'm hoping that the listeners kind of, if nothing else, to your point, like it's taking away the difference between the two. And then are there supplements out there now that are being made with synthetic cannabinoids? Is that a
Oh,
thing?
sure. Yeah.
Do you want
So
to speak to that a little bit? Because again, you're going to miss out on the full plant 100%.
yeah, and first of all, like if you go on Amazon and you type in CBD, you're
Oh
going to
my
see a
God.
list of products.
Yeah.
Amazon does not allow CBD to be sold. So they're putting CBD on the label and they're literally putting hemp oil, like olive oil, in a bottle. And they're telling you that this is high levels of extracted cannabinoids. It's a wild, wild world. Maybe they get kicked off.
Really?
Yeah, I cannot sell any of my real CBD, like real cannabinoid products on there. And so you just have to be very mindful of what you're getting because people are treating like severe ailments like epilepsy, or
Hmm.
they believe that it's going to work on cancer cells because they've seen the studies. And you have to really know that what you're taking is going to work and it's clean. Um, what were we getting at a second ago?
So actually, you just said something that got me. So on the cancer study front, have you looked at any of those cancer studies? Like, is there any kind of proposed mechanism of action that is like, do the cannabinoids somehow directly affect cancer cells? Or do you think once again, what's happening is that the plant is working through the body to allow the body to be more, to marshal its own resources more effectively?
So there was a big study on breast cancer cells in culture, and they were using THC, and it was synthetic THC. And they did find that it was, what is it, apoptosis?
Yeah, it drove so cell death. Yeah.
Yes. So, and this is pure THC, which generally doesn't, this stimulates the cannabinoid receptors. It directly binds as an agonist. This is not upregulating receptors. This is not working in CBD. They did find that having an extract of cannabis, so having THC with CBD and all these other things, actually worked more effectively. But the
Interesting.
beginning of the test telling me that THC, and that's what happens like if you go to a dispensary in Canada, they'll
Hmm.
tell you that there's this thing called Rick Simpson oil and all these specific, very high THC strains that are meant for people that are treating cancer, either with radiation and anything else they might be using on the medical front that
Yeah.
they're finding is working. So that's one aspect where, THC is very favorable.
Interesting.
And I believe it is working directly. But again, you're getting the full spectrum of cannabinoids along with THC, and it's even more effective.
Even in those studies, or are you talking just in?
In that particular study that I
So
saw.
in that particular study, they were using a whole plant extract that was just very, very high in THC.
Right. And they used an original pure THC isolate because all the pharmaceutical companies, they
Yeah.
can isolate. You can't isolate a whole plant extract. So they isolate compounds. It's just like with ketamine. I don't know if you're familiar with ketamine. It's become a very
Hmm.
popular thing.
Yeah.
Well, real ketamine is called race ketamine. This has two isomers. It's R and S. That's
Yeah.
the real ketamine, but they wanted to make this nasal spray. So they isolated one of the isomers, which is the S version. So it's called S-ketamine. And they found that that does have some antidepressive effects and things like that. But when you have the whole entire compound, once again, the effects are multiplied
Interesting. And at lower dose again.
at lower dose.
That's so
And
interesting.
I tried that stuff too. Just I
Did you?
wanted to through a doctor. And I found that, it wasn't for anything in particular. I just like to know what's going on in the psychedelic realm.
Hmm.
And it's the same thing with ayahuasca and things like that. It's always like that. Purified compounds give you a little bit of an effect, but if you want a more substantial effect at lower doses, you need to use the real plant in itself.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I find that fascinating. So, so in terms of how people would use these products. So you have the products that are not THC dominant or don't have, you actually have products that have no, basically as much THC it could be humanly removed from
Yeah.
the product.
So that's a great way to put it. So there's three types of CBD. I should educate people on it.
Yeah.
CBD type products.
Okay.
There's CBD isolate. This is the single molecule, the CBD molecule by itself. It's been taken out of an extract. Well, it's taken out of the plant and then they take it out of that extract.
Okay.
CBD by itself. The next step up is called broad spectrum. So it has a full spectrum of cannabinoids, but they do chemically remove THC. And that's good for athletes, people that are drug tested.
Hmm.
There's some people just in government jobs and they want all the benefits of a full spectrum style extract, but they will test positive for THC. So you
Okay.
can get that. I produce that in gummy form.
You
I
do.
felt
Okay.
it's called broad spectrum.
Yeah.
I felt like I was cheating a little bit because I speak on full spectrum for everything. But there is a group of people that cannot have THC due to drug tests
Yeah.
or an extreme sensitivity to THC. I've had people that took 0.1 milligram of THC, which would do nothing to most people, and they said they were on like another planet.
Yeah.
So you have to have that option. And then there's the full spectrum. That's so we have this like tremendous seed stock. It's a proprietary seed that I haven't found anyone that comes close to producing an oil that comes from our seed because these people, what they do, these people, I say it in like a negative way. So, you know,
Those
the high,
amateurs.
they're amateurs and they're making billions on this.
Yeah. Those
But
billionaire amateurs.
yeah, yeah. So in the cannabis industry, there's always hybridization, which is genetically modifying plants. I don't mean like this is a GMO plant in the sense of when we think don't eat
Isn't that where
GMO.
they're kind of putting together? It's almost like mating plants,
Right, right. You're
right?
making plants to get
Like
the
taking like my
exact
dog,
thing you want.
mini
Exactly,
labradoodle. Yeah, yeah,
exactly, exactly. So they're doing this. Traditionally, it was because everyone wanted to smoke cannabis that got you as high as possible.
yeah. Right.
Apparently, my parents' pot, when you smoked it and got high, that was not enough. So they have to make it where it's like 30 or 40% THC, which is insane by most standards, but people want to get super high. And in some instances, high levels of THC will reduce pain substantially. So, in the same way that they increased THC, they started decreasing THC to where they made strains of the cannabis plant uh, or hemp plant with very low levels of THC, like
Okay.
so low, but it came from original stock that was high THC. So it's been genetically modified. It's been hybridized to have low THC, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So is it genetically modified or hybridized? Because I feel like those are two different, my sense is those are two different terms. Like have they messed with the genes of the plant?
Well, essentially, that's what hybridizing is.
Is that what hybrid? Yeah.
Yeah,
So, because to me, I feel like hybridizing would have been like, well, no, I'm thinking probably of something else where, with like breeding dogs, you might take a dog with two dogs that express a certain feature more dramatically and breed them together. And then from the offspring, you're going to find again, like you want dogs with big ears, for
well, that's what
example.
you're getting.
And you're going to keep breeding dogs with the breed with the biggest ears until eventually you end up with this dog with these giant ears.
Yeah, yeah.
Which is
It
I
is
think,
genetic modification, right? In a sense.
well, it is, except you're not messing with the genes
Like
directly.
splicing it. Yeah,
Yeah. That's what I mean.
So now we're on the same page.
So it's kind of like selective breeding.
Right. So that's what they've done for years and years, and it's a pretty simple process, because they want the greatest yield from the plant.
Yeah.
Because if you're growing, you want as much as you can possibly get, and you need to keep it within federal regulation. So it makes sense. But the initial seed stock was like Super Silver Haze and all these funky names. And I thought, okay, that's great. They're using the future to make what they need. So what we use this old stock from the 1800s. It was originally from the UK, and it was just an old hemp seed. And they would use it to make whatever you need, fabrics. They even used to put it in cars, different things like that. But the cannabinoid profile is so perfect. That's what we found. Because you have to try many different grow techniques of different strains, and then you have to extract. It's a long process that I leave to the experts. But the level of THC that we have is higher than what most of these people put in their plants, because they were like forcing it down, then they're trying to get it back up. We just go with what the plant intended to give us. And it's like this perfect array of, let's say, a full dropper of my maximum strength oil only has about 2 milligrams of THC. Now, if I took 2 milligrams of THC by itself, I might actually feel that. But when you take it with all these other cannabinoids, it balances out, so you don't get high from it. You just get all the positive benefits. And to me, that's like our base product. I call this like the foundational product. This is the one we sell like so much of. It seems like everyone gets that. Then they add some gummies on top, and they kind of play with what works for them. That's like a real, true full spectrum. So if someone's like, this full spectrum thing sounds legit, I want to try it, and you want a real one, you get ours. We even call it a crude extract, because we're taking as much out of the plant as possible. You take it, and you're like, I'm drinking the earth.
Yeah.
So
it's very earthy. Very earthy flavor.
And you can put it in a capsule. If you don't like the flavor, there's empty capsules,
Yeah. No, for sure. That's a good little biohacker's trick, is just buy some capsules, throw it in there, and shoot it back.
But I've had people like, I can't handle the taste. I guess I need to do a return, but the effects are great. I'm like, empty capsule.
Yeah. Just
$10 on Amazon.
You'll be fine.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So then you have the next steps up, because we went through CBD isolate, broad spectrum, which has no THC, but all the cannabinoids, full spectrum, which is like our base product that is just, for me, it's phenomenal. It's like the gold standard. And then you can add, like, we have gummies that when you put it in gummy form, it allows you to not be as concerned with the THC content and staying within regulations. This is like kind of a weird fine line, because everything with CBD right now is by dry weight. So all the laws, like, they've tried to restrict things tremendously in our country with how much THC you can add, how much CBD per milligram. In a gummy form, you're not really restricted, because the dry weight is heavier, if that makes sense.
That's so funny.
Yeah, it's a loophole, but we haven't abused it. A lot of people have like abused it. Like, you can go to a store down the road and they're selling you what you can get in a dispensary, which is pretty absurd.
Yeah.
With this, we always stay within what's in like the healthy boundary of what's going to give the most medicinal benefit. And we have products that people want to be high, because sometimes people want that, because it has tremendous pain relief and it increases your sensual sensation. So it might make food taste better, sex feel better, music sound better. Artists love this stuff. Sometimes people just, like I said, they don't want to drink, but they want to feel like, hey, I feel a little blissful tonight. So, and the thing that I'm really messing with lately, I don't know why this happened. I really like the gummies too, but I started cutting the gummies into like 4 or 5 pieces. and I started microdosing.
Oh, no kidding.
Normally, yeah, normally I take my CBD in the evening. That's
Yeah.
just when I need it. Sometimes I'll take it during the day if I like have a heavy workload. But now I'm like, hey, let me try like a little quarter with breakfast, a little quarter with lunch, a little quarter with dinner, and the effects are phenomenal.
Interesting.
Microdosing, yeah, I don't know anyone that's really microdosing CBD right now, but
I
it's
will try that. Next time I
yeah.
get some of your gummies, I will try that because I definitely, I'm one of these people who I would rather have a bit of THC than to have alcohol.
Oh
That's
yeah.
that's just the way I'm wired. Like I would prefer that. I don't like being drunk. I don't enjoy it at all. Um, but I also being able to tap into what you're describing during the day, I think is a really interesting concept. But I've never. But it's like I'm not a daytime drinker. I don't want any THC,
Yeah.
particularly in my system, to affect me during the day because I feel like I, I mean, I may be one of those people that could use a little more peace because I've got too much to do. I don't have time to sit around
Same
and
thing.
check out the pretty colors. I got things to
Yeah.
get through. I got a lot to do. Um, but at the same time, to be able to take some of the edge off that uneasiness or that kind of knot in your stomach that is not always sometimes it drives you to get stuff done, but
Mhm.
sometimes it's actually an obstacle to achieving what you need to achieve because you're a little stuck. You're not really flowing. And we talked about this a little bit at the beginning before we started recording. Like, can we address this whole project of longevity, of living a longer, healthier life without this kind of attitude of fighting our way through it, but flowing into it, like with a greater sense of ease. And I do think that there's going to be more and more people are going to start talking about this balance, right? It's one of the things I sometimes I do on occasion. Well, I go to Instagram because I use Instagram for work. And there's this woman who is from India who's a comedian. And she was talking about, her name starts with a Z, Z A something. And she's talking about, yoga has been taken over by the West. We have lost yoga to the West. And she makes these really funny comments about, I see all these women going to yoga in their $200 tights with the holes in them and the whole thing. And they're rushing, 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 rushing to get to yoga. And she stops and she looks at the audience and she goes, let me tell you something. If you're rushing to get to yoga, you're doing it wrong.
You missed the point.
You completely missed the point. She's like, we used to do yoga in our pajamas. Now you need to have $200 tights. Anyway, the point being that, in our typical North American kind of overachieving kind of way, we've managed to take this thing that is supposed to be, you know, bring you a sense of peace, that is supposed to take you into a different space, and we've managed to turn it into a performance blood sport.
Mhm.
And I think that maybe if we all, whether it's microdosing, CBD, or whatever the case may be, if we can all kind of tap into this thing that allows us to continue to be productive and get what we need to get done, but maybe take away a little bit of that edge that
The
ultimately is,
noise.
well, the noise, right? And that's driving up the cortisol, that's pushing our system into overdrive, that's bottom line kind of aging us, right? If your cortisol is up all the time, I can promise you that you're accelerating your aging process.
Oh, I
And
feel it.
so, right? So, could this be a way to kind of temper that drive so that we still have the drive? I mean, look, you're a guy that uses CBD as a lifestyle. You're a jujitsu dude. Like, it's not like you can't turn it on every once in a while when you need to and connect with your inner animal, but it's a as needed basis, not a constant state of being.
Right. And I do these things in a very effective way. I used to train at night and I found that it was just so detrimental to my sleep.
Ugh.
So now I'm doing it in the morning.
Yeah.
And one thing that really helped me, sleep was never an issue for me until kids came around.
Yeah. Funny how that works.
And my son especially, he wanted to get up, every 3 hours would have been a gift, but it was always every 2 hours or every 90 minutes or whatever it might be. But when I was using CBD during that time, because we co-slept, he was between us, I felt rejuvenated even with broken up sleep. I felt like when I would get even 2 hours of sleep, it was the most optimized sleep I could possibly get in that period.
Really?
Thank God, yes, because there were times where you'd be up every 45 minutes. And in
Yeah.
that case, you're just not getting sleep. So
No.
I knew what that felt like. But yeah, for me, it's just like a godsend. I can't speak enough about how much it's helped me in life. I
Hmm.
think it's helped me with addiction because I have an addictive personality too. Like if I'm going to go fight, I want to do it to the maximum degree. I was addicted to drugs, whatever I do, I always want to crush it. That's what my friend says to me. He's like, you might belong in New York. Everyone here just wants to crush it all the time. And I do have an addictive personality. I've always worked on it, thankfully. But I think it's tempered that by allowing, maybe it's my serotonin receptors to be more optimized, my endocannabinoid system to be more optimized, that I don't really seek outside things as much. And I do have this more like greater sense of calm. And
Hmm.
I'm like thankful for that plant, thankful for everything. And I don't know if that's part of it or vice versa, whatever it might be, but it's a good thing.
Nice. It's a
Yeah.
good thing. It sure is. So, in terms of people who are listening to this, I think that the final message is for me. I mean, if people can take away this one thing, that is that, and I often will talk about what can we find from nature that will tap into our own system and enable the system to do what it needs to do best? Because, we keep trying to do for the body what we think it can't do, and we kind of tend to fail, right? I mean, sometimes you need surgery. It's a thing, but very often it's really about flipping those switches in the system so that the system can take over and do things that we don't even know how it's happening or what it's doing. And so what I'd love to invite the audience to consider is that maybe if you're struggling with something and fighting so hard with it, whether it's a chronic illness or whether it's pain or inflammation or an immune system that's in overdrive, because we get a lot of that, and especially women. I think out of all the cases of autoimmune disease in America this year, 4 out of 5 of them will be women.
Mm.
Like, that's a crazy stat, right? And we often talk about how women don't respond the same to different compounds or different medications. But what I'm starting to feel is that when we talk about these compounds that are coming to us from nature that are really tapping into our body's own system and almost like rebooting it, you're now going to almost take away the gender differences, in the sense that your body will respond as a woman's body, well, my body will respond as a woman's body. Your body will respond in the way that it needs to. And so it's almost like we're less directive and more just flipping the switches back on so the system can come online again.
And that's the beauty of the endocannabinoid system because
Hmm.
they found receptor sites on male sperm cells and they've also found it on ovaries. I think we
Wow.
may have discussed, previously, it's specific to you
Yeah.
where you need it. The CB2 receptors are more in the immune system,
Hmm.
CB1 more in the central nervous system. And it seems to give you what you need when you need it. There's that diurnal effect of the endocannabinoid system that when you do take a CBD type product, like a cannabinoid product during the day, you get the effects you need, which is more focus. You can take it with your coffee in the morning and you won't have the degradation of adenosine as quickly.
Yeah.
There's so many like benefits to the time of day you take it. Pain relief will work throughout the day, anxiety relief. But I find that when I take the CBD in the morning, which I do maybe once or twice a week, I get such tremendous focus. And I
Hmm.
thought that was a cool thing, but I'm going to even push the boundaries even more. We're creating one that has cordyceps in it, more CBG, which has a little more focus aspect
Yeah.
and more like immune support. I just think that's kind of like a fun thing, like an add-on with a full spectrum base without a high level of THC. But
Yeah.
then at night, you get what you need. It helps the body just tone down, get back into a parasympathetic state where we can just kind of drift off, providing we don't put these hurdles in front of us.
Hmm.
You know?
Yeah. No, that you never can get
Yeah.
past that whole sleep hygiene business.
Yeah. But I think, yeah, like it's very specific to you. Like fertility, me and my wife, we were told we couldn't have kids, and now we have a 3-year-old and a 3-month-old, and we were using CBD all the way up till we found out she was pregnant.
And did you stop then?
She
Well, not
stopped.
you. She stopped.
She stopped.
Yeah.
Randomly, she would use it if she had some sort of like needed sleep that night and the baby wasn't allowing her to sleep, because I thought that would be a little more important. And we have two of like the healthiest kids I've ever seen, connected, switched on kids, and she didn't use it consistently. And I don't recommend that, but I think up until that point and then after, perfect.
Mm-hmm. And it was, yeah. So we're not being prescriptive here, folks, but
Right, right, right.
this is, this is what, you guys did. And I've seen those babies. They're pretty freaking beautiful. So,
Yeah, they're cool. They're fun.
yeah. Okay. Well, is there anything else that I mean, there's always more to talk about, obviously. I mean, every time we talk, you're like, oh my God, like so many different studies. And it is interesting to me how much research is now going on in the space. What's, I think the challenge is that, your pharma company is going to continue to want to isolate compounds to try and create something that they can patent. When at the end of the day, the message that you drive home very effectively is that there's something about this full spectrum, this whole plant that science can't reproduce. It's just you're trying to reinvent the wheel when the wheel is pretty darn effective just the way it is.
Right. Can't live off vitamins, right? We have to get whole foods. So
yeah, 100%. All right. Well, if there's nothing else for today, why don't we tell people where to find you, how to get their hands on your beautiful product, and yeah, all the things.
okay, so our website is elementhealthsupply.com. Also, Element Health CBD would work. It would direct you there. We're primarily on Instagram, and you can just look up at Element Health. You can email us at info@elementhealthsupply.com. But we're pretty easy to find through Instagram. I'm sure on your page you can find a few things, but Element Health. Element Health CBD, not Elemental Health and not Element CBD. We've had a lot of other companies try to pop up.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, they try to like use our name to try to open up something. They fall off. I'm sure a bunch of them aren't even around anymore, but it's Element Health because we started off as really a wellness company.
Yeah. Well, you still are.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you still are, right? I mean, I think that it's you're in that space of whole health and holistic, going at it from a very holistic perspective. So Adam, thank you. Actually, did we have a code for the listeners?
Oh yeah.
We've switched it up so many times. I can't remember where we've landed anymore.
Longevity is perfect. I love it. My wife was telling me today, like, that's a beautiful code because that's like how she sees our CBD, allowing us to de-stress, live longer, feel better in the long run. So yeah, let's stick with longevity.
Let's stick with longevity. Okay, guys. So it's and if you have any questions, I will say that your customer service is fantastic. Yeah. So
not me, someone that's like highly educated in it will respond.
Yeah, well, it's a top-down thing. You can't be the one guy doing all the things, but the team that you've built is really quite special. So
I try to answer everything as much as I can. So and I'm training my kids to respond to. So
oh no. So if there's a couple of spelling mistakes, you're going to have to forgive the 3-year-old.
Yeah, or it might be mine. Who knows?
You never know.
Great talking to you.
It was great talking to you too. I always look forward to our chats. So yeah. I know we'll be doing it again. So thank you so much for your time today and for sharing. And I hope that people give it a try and then give us some feedback. Because I always love hearing from people and how they felt about this. And for this is really about playing around with it and, to your point, finding what works for you. So thank you so much.
Reviews, because like we can't put fake reviews up. And it's pretty amazing stuff. And people spill their hearts out because when you get relief and you feel that peace, it's a game changer. So
100%. Thank you so much.
We'll talk soon.
Yeah.